I've never been called a competitive storyteller, but I like that. I like it. So thanks, Rain, for the invite, and thanks to Lululemon for the outfit. So it's great. I appreciate it. And so 35 years ago, I was a radiology resident at the University of Pittsburgh, and I woke up one morning with unexplained left shoulder pain, just out of the blue. Had no injury, and I went out to play basketball that morning, and by the end of the game, I thought my arm was going to fall off. You know, it was that bad. I never had any kind of shoulder pain like that before, even though I'd been a pole vaulter in my college days here at Duke years before. So I went to the orthopedic surgeon I knew. He prescribed a powerful non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug called Indocin, and I took it for a couple of days. It didn't really help my shoulder much, but I got wicked mouth ulcers to the point where I could not eat or talk by the end of the week. Took me that long to figure out it was coming from the drugs. I managed to shove the pills through the ulcers, until I realized what was going on. And as soon as I quit taking the drug, the ulcers went away, but my shoulder really never got any better for the next year. I finished my residency, and I went into doing early research on magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, back in the 80s. And one of the first things I did was make myself a guinea pig, so I went in the scanner and scanned my own shoulder, hoping I could figure out what was going on. Now, we didn't really know much about how to read an MRI scan of the shoulder back then, so I couldn't really make a diagnosis, but I did go to one of my other orthopedic surgeon friends and talked him into operating on my shoulder. Probably the worst decision I ever made. But he did arthroscopy, found some bursitis, found some tendonitis, no rotator cuff tear, and wound up removing the bursa and shaving a little bit off my acromion bone. That was it. And I healed up from the surgery, but my shoulder didn't get any better. That went on for the next 15 years, really, and I lost all my upper body strength and just had chronic shoulder pain for that long. Now, in the meantime, I wrote a couple of scientific papers on MRI of the shoulder. It caught on, became a popular thing. I read hundreds of MRI scans of the shoulders and came to Duke in '93 to be chief of musculoskeletal radiology. And one of the big issues we were dealing with at that time were people who were claustrophobic in the MRI scanner. If anybody's ever been in an MRI scanner, it's sometimes called a coffin that makes noise. So not what someone who's sick wants to go into, So now the options were to give people Valium by mouth. That didn't work very well. Or you could give Valium by IV. That worked great. People didn't care where they were. But the side effect of Valium is you quit breathing if you get too much Valium. And you don't want to be inside a magnet for an hour and forget to breathe. So I looked for alternatives and discovered hypnosis, and I trained in hypnosis. And that worked really well for people to get them through this claustrophobic experience by pretending they were somewhere else. We taught a lot of the MRI techs at Duke how to do basic hypnosis. That kind of led me down the whole integrative medicine rabbit hole, and I eventually wound up calling myself a holistic radiologist, which most people think sounds like an oxymoron. I did co-found the Duke Integrative Medicine Center in 1998, and I trained in acupuncture and then practiced acupuncture in the clinics at Duke for the next 5 years. Around that time, my first marriage started falling apart. And I wound up going through a divorce in 2002. And shortly after that, my left shoulder pain went away. So and that was my aha moment of realizing that my shoulder pain had been about repressed anger for 20 years. And going through the divorce, released all that, and my shoulder got better. So that was my first experience of an emotional metaphor causing physical symptoms in the body. Now, shortly after that, I learned emotional freedom techniques known as the tapping technique or EFT, which turned out to be a perfect combination of my acupuncture training and my hypnosis training. It's just like acupressure for the emotions. You don't use any needles. And it's slightly different from hypnosis. And in hypnosis, we emphasize positive suggestions. In EFT, we focus on the negative because we want to tap that out of our body. And the simplest explanation for how it works, how many people know what tapping is? Okay, it's becoming more and more popular. The simplest explanation is a computer metaphor that every bad thing that ever happens to you emotionally is like a malware program. It gets downloaded into your acupuncture meridians, uploaded in through your nervous system into your brain, and the limbic system is where all your emotional processing occurs, and there's a file in there for every bad thing that ever happened to you. In the file, there is a picture, a story, and this malware program that's in there. And for example, a military veteran who's had PTSD from the war has flashbacks triggered by any number of things, and the program basically takes them right back to the battlefield. Same thing happens with car accidents. That's the most common cause of PTSD, but any other emotional event, that program will run when you think about it. So to do the tapping, we simply find the file name and repeat the file name while we're tapping on the acupuncture points on your face and your chest, and what you effectively do is you uninstall the program. Delete, 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 delete. And that's actually how it works. So at the end of the tapping session, you go back, you can check in the file, there should be a picture of the story, but the program will be gone and your body will not react when you think about that memory. And it works sometimes very quickly. When I was in the sports medicine clinic doing acupuncture, I had a lady come in with really bad shoulder pain. And her pain had come on out of the blue like mine had, but it had gone on to progress where the range of motion in her shoulder completely went away. She could not move her shoulder at all. It's called a frozen shoulder. It's a very painful condition, can last for months or years. And it's jokingly referred to as the T-Rex disease, because you basically can just do this, okay? You can't, women cannot unbutton their bra strap. You might not even be able to comb your hair. So I asked her what had happened right before her shoulder started to freeze up, and she couldn't think of anything initially, but when she came back for the second visit, she remembered, oh, my best friend moved away abruptly to another city, didn't say goodbye, no explanation, and she was really angry about it. And we figured out that was the anger that was stuck in her shoulder, and we did the tapping and the acupuncture, and it went away and released in a week or two instead of months or years. So and she said that was a huge breakthrough for her, and was amazing. So that was great for me to learn that, because a couple years later, I got a frozen shoulder. And it's more common in women than men, but I knew what was happening. I got pain, I didn't have an injury, and all of a sudden I couldn't really reach very far, and I was turning into T-Rex, and I thought, this is bad. Now, at that time, I had a lot of political anger. It was in the second Bush administration, and I was becoming a political activist, and all that anger got stuck in my shoulder. So knowing about the tapping, I was able to tap it away in a couple weeks. And that was a big breakthrough for me. Now, the good news is years later, I have no shoulder pain at all. My shoulders are stronger than they've been since college, and I've been able to work out really hard for the last 5 years. Now my shoulders only hurt when I'm angry. And so it's a clue to me that, hey, my shoulders hurt and I must be angry about something. And then I'll do some tapping, and I might not even know what it is, but I'll just say angry about, my shoulder's angry about something. And then it'll usually come up, oh, I know what it is now. And then an hour or two later, my shoulder will feel better. So anybody with any sort of chronic pain can use, the idea is to use your pain as your feedback meter to tell you when you're emotionally stressed, like Raymond was talking about your back. That was your meter that was telling you your life was out of balance, and you know, a lot of emotion stuck in your back. Now, by this time in my career, I've read thousands of MRI scans, and the most important thing I'll leave you with from that experience is there's one paper that one of my friends wrote. Took 100 people with normal shoulders, no pain at all, put them in the MRI scanner and scanned them. They were volunteers. And people over the age of 50, about a third of them had a rotator cuff tear, tendonitis, or some other problem. They don't have any symptoms, and that's like a shock to people when they hear that. And so when someone comes in to see me carrying their MRI scan and say, this is why my shoulder hurts, and I go, oh yeah, there's 100 other people out there who have the same thing, and their shoulder doesn't hurt, so there must be something else going on. And then we look at what the emotional burdens they're carrying on their shoulder and work on those. Sometimes you can deal with those, and whatever's going on in your shoulder, doesn't bother you anymore. And the interesting thing is it's also true of the spine. They've done studies like that for the spine and the knee. So you can have a meniscal tear or a disc herniation and not have any symptoms. And then you got to start asking that question, what emotional burdens am I carrying in that part of my body? So that's an important thing to keep in mind anytime you're you're having an MRI or another X-ray study done, they'll always look at the emotional piece of what's going on. And so if you have chronic pain or you know someone who does, and they want to avoid drugs, surgery, injections, and to be honest, most of those things are only quick temporary fixes that don't last, and they're sometimes not even better than the placebo effect. They can go to my website, larryburk.com, and read my blogs, look at my coaching program, and also I'm doing workshops. And if they want to take on their emotional stuff that they're carrying, there are ways to do that. And my next workshop is going to be in Boone in 2 weeks up at the Art of Living Retreat Center. And yeah, it's for people who want to deal with the emotional stuff they're carrying and really heal and not just suppress their pain with medicine. So with that, I'll just say happy tapping and thanks. Thanks, Rainey. Thank you.